quite an interesting thing this morning when I clicked on to find out that I got to welcome people through the waiting room. That was interesting.
Yeah, that's a new one. So, and then I went ahead and disabled it. So now as people come in, they can just come in.
Okay, good.
Ray, I love your background. Do you know what your background is? Can you see it?
My background?
Sephardic.
Yeah, it's the sanctuary, your sanctuary.
Yeah. Thanks to Yoni. I mean, he put the picture up, so I'm just using it. If anyone would like to see other pictures, I'm more than happy to show you other pictures too, but that's fine. This is kind of nice.
I finally came home from the tropics, back in my house.
Okay. Oh, hi, Christina. How are you?
You have to unmute, Christina.
You're muted.
Oh, guys.
Yeah.
I'm well. How are you, Rabbi Ray?
I'm good, honey. I'm very good. Thank God.
Here's to you.
Jerry, is that you on top, standing on the pillar?
Not quite. That's Caesarea, 2014.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty much up there. You go from being the pillar of the earth to a pillar of salt. If you should fall. Hi, Christoph.
Hi, good to be here. Sorry, I was a minute late. Maybe Christina said something. I heard through the grapevine that the network documentary is ready, or like something is finished there.
Oh, really? What were they doing?
Remember, I told you some time ago, I was busy working with our filmmaker called Norbert Kaye. He's a brilliant guy. He filmed everything we did over 12 years, you know. And he's been commissioned to compile a documentary of the Netzwerk work, but mainly the history of the Bunda Jews. You know, there are no Bunda Jews now. There were none at all. But those who were the small community were researched mainly by a local historian. And we picked up his work and we tried to give faces to the people, not just to examine how they died, but what their life was like before they were murdered.
Uh-huh.
So, as you know, Rabbi Ray, and one important thing of this work was the 3-generation dialogue. You know, the youngsters, the parent generation and the grandparent generation.
Right.
Jewish side and non-Jewish side. And, you know, many of the Temple Sinai members know that there was a youth exchange created as well.
Right.
So this is quite important. And these are changed days now because this kind of work is more or less dying out in Germany. And the idea is to provide a film which will be given to schools to motivate people to do this kind of work or take up some kind of Holocaust awareness. So the film was presented to the press just the other day, and it's got to be polished a bit yet. You know, things like subtitles have got to be checked, and the spellings of names will have to be checked, but it's more or less finished and it's a beautiful piece of work.
Oh, nice.
And you star in it yourself, Rabbi Ray.
Oh.
And me, and Christoph.
And you and Christoph, and yeah. Christoph, whatever happened with your book about the first and second generation of survivors?
Yeah, I'm still working on it. You know, busy with life and numerous projects, but that's still on the bucket list. Yeah,
life does have a way of interfering with what your projects are all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that too. I'm so used to not having anything on my calendar. So I just accepted 3 invitations for a day, way at the end of June, only to realize that I have a wedding that day. It's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Okay, so now I get to undo all of those invitations. It's very nice. Well, anyway. Hey Les, where's Alan? Is he coming?
Well, I haven't been in touch with him since I communicated with him the other day. Although I suspect he'll be here. I told him the first half hour is just chit chat, some gossip, and you don't really get going on Torah until about his time would be 9 o'clock, I think. Anyway, it's good to see you, Rabbi. I like the background.
Yeah, that's our temple, the sanctuary, and the ark doors, and the Aron Kodesh, and the Torah scrolls, and everything else.
How many Torah? Do you have time to tell me a little bit about those Torah scrolls?
Oh, well,
Good morning.
it's let's see if you can see them. There are 5 here. There's another 2 in the chapel. So I think we have 7 altogether, one of which is really a Holocaust survivor, so it really can't be used for services because it's very incomplete. Most of it was burned away. But we still honor it by putting it in the ark. Let's see. This is the one in the middle is our Holocaust Torah. That's one that we received from the synagogue in England that rescued about 400 Torah scrolls after the war. And it's a very special one. It's probably about 400 years old. It's probably from Poland, and it was written by a left-handed scribe, which is very rare. And it's what is called a Feifiot scroll. Feifia means beautiful, but it's really a play on words because it really means it's a duplicated Hebrew letter Fe. Every time, or most times, because every once in a while he doesn't do it, but in most instances, a Fe is written like a backwards C with a loop in it. And a Feifia, Fe, is written like a backwards C with a loop and another Fe written inside the first Fe. So it's really a piece of work of art. It's an enormously long Torah, so therefore it's not on sheepskin. It's on deerskin, written on deerskin. In order to be written on deerskin, a deer would have had to be captured and ritually slaughtered. Otherwise, it can't just shoot a deer and then use its meat or its skin. So therefore, the place that deer were protected was in the forests of the Pane, of the rulers of Poland in the 1600s. The Jews were tax collectors for the Pane, and they were paid to collect taxes, which must have been
Good morning.
which must have been a brutal task. And in one community, it would be assumed that the Pane paid the Jewish tax collector by giving him permission to have access to a half a dozen of his deer so that they could write a Torah scroll.
Mm-hmm.
It might have even taken more than a half a dozen. It might have taken a dozen deer to write a Torah scroll. But in any instance, this is written on deerskin. You can tell because in 400 years of time, deerskin tends in places where it's been touched to become translucent. So you can actually see through the skin and through the writings. We don't use it very often. We only use it on confirmation and on Yom HaShoah. So it's very nice.
I have a question. How did you figure out the virtual background? I'm so impressed.
Yoni did it.
Thank you, Yoni.
And let's see.
We had a fun call after I accidentally set off the alarm system at work. So we started frazzled, but we rallied.
So did you get a new computer iPad, Rabbi?
Did I what?
Did you need to upgrade your hardware? Did you need to get a new computer or iPad to do
No,
that?
no.
No. Okay. Well, yes, good. I did.
Oh, really?
Too old. Yeah.
No.
All I have to do at my house is complain. Is your computer loading slowly? And my husband, Andy, says, you need a new laptop. I've been telling you that. Let's go order one. So it's easily accomplished, but then getting a new computer is a lot of work. So I don't recommend it.
Yeah, so here's a different setting. This is the 50th anniversary of my grandparents, and they're somewhere in there. They're in the front, and all of their children are around them. So that's children and spouses. They had 8 kids, and I think they lost about 3 others, and all 8 of them lived pretty good lives, including my dad, who is somewhere in there, and my mother, who are somewhere in there also. I can't tell where they are. It's too small a picture. Anyway, let's get back to this. So now I have to download a whole bunch of other pictures to get more background in. And the one I really liked, I was going to do this for Les, because I thought it would be kind of appropriate.
Yeah.
Hey, you like the way the waves break and all that stuff.
I love it. Let's go surfing.
It's too cool for words. Anyway, so that's that. And I'll have to use that more often next year. It's good to see Kathy, wherever you disappeared to. There you are. Just a name. Oh, how you feeling, kid? You're muted.
How's that?
Yeah, good.
You did good.
I've been home for about a week. I had my picture up, but I took it off because I spilled water all over me. I'm in bed. But I'm just getting a little more strength every day.
Good.
Yeah, so thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's see. We have war to discuss here. Last week we started in how appropriate and how timely. We started in Deuteronomy around verse, 3 or something, 2, maybe even. Did we do 1? Yeah, we might have even started with 1. And it was right after the ceasefire in Gaza, and how timely we're starting a section on warfare just after going through 11 days of warfare, and So I just thought it was pretty timely and pretty interesting to do. The thing is that we have a couple of players when it comes to. No, I guess we started with about verse 3 or 4 last week. This whole idea of who is involved in warfare is kind of interesting, because the first player involved in warfare is really not the people, it's really God. And the first person to be involved in talking to the troops about to go into battle is the chaplain, is the priest. It's interesting how, Torah sets forth this idea that the priest essentially reassures the people that God is with them. So therefore, a war is either a holy war or it's not a war, which is exactly what Islam picked up with the word jihad. That every war is a war for Allah's victory, which is the thing they scream every time they do something dastardly. God is great, that sort of thing. But in the biblical scenario, the priest comes to address the people lined up for battle. And he says, have no fear, God is with you. And this is a priest who is well acquainted with warfare, and he has a special title. He is called the Mashuach Milchama. He's called the person sent forth to battle, the one who is going to help the people be saved. And he must address the people in Hebrew, the holy language, regardless of what other languages they know and are familiar with. He has to speak to them in Hebrew, which is the first time in Torah that we're taught that Hebrew is the holy language, the language that God speaks, so to speak. The second group of people that are invited into this panoply of actors are judges or court officials, shotrim. In modern Hebrew, shoter is a police officer, but it could also be a judge of some sort. So there are no conscientious objectors, no one who is, going to burn his draft card or what have you. But the judges now come, and they are the ones responsible for giving exemptions to battle. And they have 4 exemptions for battle. And those exemptions don't include weak knees, bad back, sore feet, none of that, none of the 4F stuff. They all have to do with a person's life situation and with a person's readiness for battle. So last week, we really didn't get very far in terms of the text. We got through, I think, verse 7, but we did talk about the concept of salvation or redemption as not being theological terms in Judaism, but being physical terms. That redemption meant that God would rescue us from a foreign land in order to bring us to the land of Israel. So the Jews were redeemed from Egyptian slavery, taken out of a foreign land, brought toward the land of Israel. So that's redemption. Salvation is when God rescues a people in the land of Israel to keep them from being exported. So Isaiah and almost all the prophets who are pre-exilic talk a lot about Yeshua, talk a lot about, in fact, Isaiah, Yeshuahu means God will save you. The name Isaiah itself. Yehoshua, Joshua, means God will save you. Hosea, Hosea, the prophet, means God will save. So pre-exilic prophets essentially were coming to the people with salvationary ideas. How do you save yourself from being defeated in the land of Israel? And they said, basically, it depends on your moral behavior. If you stop worshiping false gods, and if you stop acting like a bunch of jerks, then God will save you. And you won't have to go to battle, and you won't be destroyed, and you won't be taken over, and the Assyrians will not hurt you, and the Babylonians will leave you alone. But if you continue to act like jerks and you continue to resist, thinking that you're strong enough to defeat them without God on your side, then you're gone. You're out of here, which is what happened twice in biblical Jewish history, when the Assyrians defeated the northern kingdom and when the Babylonians took over the southern kingdom and destroyed the Temple of Solomon. So then we went on to talk about, or almost went on to talk about, the rest of the succeeding verses. So I think we get to, where we leave off. I think we left off on around well, let's just sort of review from verse 5 on. But I think we did 5. So after the priests, the judges come along and they review with the troops what will give a person an exemption from battle. So the first thing that a judge says is there anyone here who has built a new house but hasn't dedicated it? I think we did that last week. Let him go back to his home and dedicate it, lest he die in battle and someone else dedicate it. So we're talking about someone who has just recently built a house, has not lived in it for a year, has not paid the HOA fees yet, hasn't gotten all the furniture put in place, hasn't fixed the leaks in the plumbing, taken care of the hole in the roof, put up the new windows and the shutters, painted the walls, hasn't really lived in it and gotten it ready for living in for a year. He's exempt from battle. Why? Because, as Rashi would say, he's thinking about his house. He's not thinking about warfare. And therefore, he's liable to get killed right away because he's got his mind somewhere else. And that would be terrible. The second thing that gives you an exemption is somebody has planted a vineyard, but hasn't seen grapes grow yet, hasn't harvested it yet, which is usually about a 2-year, 3-year process. Grapes start to come in around the 3rd year. The vines grow, then the leaves fall off, then the vines grow some more, and the leaves get bigger. And then usually in the 3rd year, the vines grow to a full height, and the leaves become enormous, and grapes begin to um, grow underneath the leaves, and they can be harvested, and wine can be made, etc. So if someone has planted a vineyard but has never harvested it, let him go back home, lest he die in battle and someone else take over, someone else harvest it. In other words, if you've built things, if you've planted things, if you've started to create a new life for yourself, transitioning to a new way of living, your mind is not going to be on battle. You're worried about what you're leaving behind more than anything else, and you need to have something to fight for. If it's a family, if it's a built home, if it's a vineyard that's already established and ready to be used to make a living, go back home and get things ready so that in case there's another battle, you'll be more in tune with the fight than you are in tuned with harvesting and redecorating. And then finally, the third thing, if you've become engaged and you haven't taken possession, that is, you haven't gotten married yet, but you're engaged. And as we know in Jewish law, engagement was marriage. If you were engaged, it was a formal procedure in which gifts were exchanged, a document was exchanged, and a bride price was paid, and a gift was given to the groom's family from the bride's family, and a glass was broken, sealing the deal. And to all extents and purposes, except for cohabitation, you were married. And in order to break an engagement, it wasn't a matter of just, here, take your ring back, I'm done with you. It was really a divorce. You had to go through a formal divorce procedure to get out of this relationship. So consequently, if you paid the bride price, this is verse 7, but you haven't married her yet, so go back home, lest you die in battle and someone else marry you. You got to have a house. You got to have some means of income before you get engaged. They come one after the other. You can't get engaged and say, I think I'll plant a vineyard. You know what? Maybe next year we'll build a house. But where are you going to live? So house, vineyard, engagement, marriage, that order. And that's the order written down in the Torah. And now I think we start with verse 8. Let's see if I can do this. One participant at a time. Let's see. Can I share my screen, Yoni, or do you have to share yours?
Yeah, there you go. You can do it now. Sorry, I was hogging it.
Okay, you were hogging it? Okay.
Yeah, but now you should be good.
And what do I do here? I hit share screen, and I do, let's see. I don't really want to do this whole thing. I just want to do this. So let me just put that aside there. And let me open this up a little bit more. And let me click on this. I don't know, does that come up?
Not yet. So when you click on the share screen, oh, there we go. It's starting. Perfect. A+.
Perfect. Yeah, except that I don't see the shared screen. So someday we'll figure that out, right? So here is verse 8. And it says, so lest he die in battle, another marry her. Vayasfu hashotrim ledaber el ha'am va'amru, and this is the final exemption. And the judge shall, this is either continue, Yosef, or sof, finish, complete. So the priest shall continue or shall end by saying to the people, va'amru, saying, mi ha'ish hayare, anyone who is afraid. This is not just a little bit afraid, because everybody's a little bit afraid before battle, but this is like terrified, like rooted in place, terrified. Varach halevav, and soft of heart. The translation here is disheartened, but rach means soft, rock soft. That's unusual. Soft of heart. Usually you would say muglev, cowardice, but here soft-hearted. Yelech v'yashov leveto, let him leave now and return to his house. V'lo yimas et levav achiv kalivavo, so that he will not melt the heart of his brethren like his heart. Yimas means to melt from the root masas. But in Hebrew, if you wanted to say, I'm sick of this, you'd probably say something like nimasli. I've had enough of it. It's disgusting to me. So here, it's yimas et levav, his heart will melt. In other words, he won't have any courage whatsoever. He won't be able to even pick up a weapon to defend himself. He will be just rooted in place in his fear and trepidation and his inability to fight against the enemy. And when his fellows look at him and see that he's cowering, they're also going to lose heart and say, gee, if that guy is cowering, what's going to happen to the rest of us? So he also gets to go home. Now, the deal is, you've got 4 different groups of people here who might be leaving the battlefield. This one is the last. And so consequently, he's going to be leaving along with those who have built a house, planted a garden, engaged a woman. No one will know what his reason for exemption is. They won't be able to differentiate, and they won't be able to point to him and say, there goes the coward. He will just fit in with the rest of the group until he gets back home. And then I'm sure when he gets back home, his family will know why he's there, and his community might know why he's there, but he sort of gets a quiet pass out of battle.
Rabbi, I have a question. I guess it refers back to last week.
Uh-huh.
If a man is basically supposed to complete the jobs of emerging manhood, build a house, plant a vineyard, get married, would that ensure that the soldiers are more mature than the average 18-year-old? At what age did one accomplish these goals?
That they could be enlisted in battle until they were 40.
I know, but would you start at a later age if it's not exactly a prerequisite, but you're allowed to do these other things first?
Well, think about this. In biblical times, most men married at 15 or 16.
Okay.
So they would have been probably aided in getting started by their fathers or brothers. They would have certainly been married by 16, 17. And women would be married by 14, 15, 16. By the age of 20, they're already middle-aged, seasoned human beings, because the life expectancy is probably 30s,
Okay.
35,
Well,
40.
then never mind. I guess not.
Yeah, right. So obviously anybody who could lift a sword or a board with a nail in it was ready for battle. Only warlike nations that were empires outfitted their soldiers with uniforms. Most of the time, people went to war in the shmatas that they had, and riding the horse they owned, or the mule or the donkey, and with homemade weapons, whatever they might be, a long stick with a knife attached to it, held on to the end of the stick with a piece of leather, or duct tape, whatever they had handy at the time. So it was kind of a ragtag army, which really relied a lot on the expertise and the ability of the generals, of the commanders.
I was going to say, like in Vietnam, were there any draft dodgers?
Yeah.
It had to be, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So now we have the 4 exemptions, and verse 9 comes and says, "V'haya kichlot hashotrim l'daber el ha'am ufakdu sarei tzvaot barosh ha'am." And so the judges finished saying what they're going to say. They came to an end of the exemption period. And they're speaking to the people assembled to go to war is over. They're done with their task. And now, faktu sarei tzvaot. And now the officers of the army, of the tzava, the sarei tzvaot, the officers of the host, will come to the head of the group, right? That is Barosh Ha'am. They'll assume command. They'll come to the head of the people, assuming command. Ki tikrav el ir ha lehilachem aleha v'karata eleha l'shalom. And so now they are giving the rules of war to the people because they're in command.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I have a question about timing.
Okay.
I assume this is before we cross over the Jordan. But maybe I'm not right about that, because nobody's built a house.
Yeah, I mean, all of Deuteronomy supposedly is taking place on the other side of the Jordan River. I mean, Moses is going to die on the other side of the Jordan River. And if Moses is giving all these rules and regs, it must be on the other side of the river. So these are his rules that he's establishing for when they cross over and live in the land of Israel. Was that the question?
Well, kind of, but they're just about to engage in war.
No, these are the rules. When you get over there and you become your own nation, these are the rules you'll abide by when you go to war. In other words, I'm telling you now, you're going to go live in your land, but you're going to go to war. Right? It ain't going to be peaceful. You're going to have enemies all around you, and they're going to fight. And these are the rules and regs that you'll employ when you have to go to battle. Okay, it's what you'll live by down the road after I'm gone and you're in the land. Okay.
It sounds from the reading that most of the people were in Miluim. It was not really a big army. Everybody was in Miluim, and then you call in when there was a war. Is that right?
I would think so. Yeah, I don't think they had a standing army. Mainly because you had 12 tribes. So and each tribe had its own rulers, its own heads. And so therefore you had tribes going to battle against other peoples in those tribal areas. So these were only battles against peoples as opposed to against other tribes, individual tribes. Because we have the whole book of Judges in which, each individual judge fights on behalf of his tribe against another group of people. So for instance, Samson is from the tribe of Dan, which is where Tel Aviv is. And he fights against the Philistines, which is where Gaza is, right? So it's Tel Aviv against Gaza. That's Samson and Delilah. But, we know it's not really a Samson and Delilah battle. It's really a sun and moon battle. It's a myth story. But, so you have Yiftach, you have Jephthah fighting against the Ammonites on the Golan Heights. So he's fighting for the tribe of Manasseh against the Ammonites. They're next to each other, so it's a tribal interplay. So these are really rules for the whole country having to defend itself against another outside threat. Or maybe, in fact, these were also rules that applied when a tribe went to battle against a smaller people or another people that lived on their borders. So the rules might have worked both ways, as a whole or just a tribal battle against a group that was close by. Mi odea, who knows? I don't, it's not clear here. But in any event, the rules are pretty clear. So the first thing that the commander of the troops has to say is, when you draw near to a city to fight against it, lehilachem, to fight them, you shall karata, you shall declare or offer or shout out to it terms of peace. In other words, We're coming to defeat you because it's time for this warfare. Instead of going to war, let's just make peace. What do you say? We just make peace. No war, no killing, no nothing, just peace. And now is when it gets really messy. Because in biblical times, just like today, peace is never peace. Peace is never peaceful. Peace always involves disaster. Why does it involve disaster? Because you can't just offer terms of peace and the other group says, okay, and then you walk away, because you're just going to have to come back next year and start to do it all over again. In the meantime, they've gotten stronger, and your troops are getting a little tired of coming for false alarms. So now comes verse 11, and it says, V'haya im shalom ta'ancha, and if they respond with peace to you, ufatcha lach, and they opened up to you, that is, they opened the gates and let you in, v'haya kol ha'am hanimtzabo, then all of the people who are found within the gates, that is, all the people that you were going to go to war with, yiyu lecha lamas va'avaducha. All the people shall serve you as forced labor. So you offer peace, they accept peace because maybe they take a look over their city walls and they realize that you've amassed 10,000 people to fight against them and they haven't got a chance. So they say, okay, we don't have a chance. Better to live as servants than to die as trapped mice in our own walled-in city. So we give up, and we'll do whatever you need. So then here we have evidence of forced labor coming from defeated cities. And now comes verse 12, still getting more complicated. V'im lo tashlim imcha, and if they don't respond peacefully to you, they don't give in. V'asita imach milchama, and they're ready to do battle with you. V'tzarta alecha, then you shall you shall constrict them. Tsar means to make narrow. You shall lay siege to them. You shall hem them in, so to speak. Tsar is the middle of the word Mitzrayim, Tsar Rayim, the narrow place, Mitzrayim, and Egypt. It was always called in biblical terms the narrow place, the place that hems people in. And so here it says quite clearly, if they don't want to accept terms of peace, then lay siege to them. Now, what does it mean to lay siege to a city? It's kind of interesting how biblical regulations and modern warfare sort of live coterminously. We just had this battle against Hamas, in which Israel is, accused of doing what the Bible tells us to do: lay siege to it. That is, hem it in, constrict it, right? The rest of the world is so eager to pump money back into Gaza, it's like a little disgusting. But after all, that's what anti-Semites do. They try to offset whatever the Jews have accomplished. And so, let's rush right on in and give them lots of money so they can, what, rebuild their cities? Are you kidding? How about redo their tunnels? How about rebuild their missiles? How about restore all of their military stuff before they even think one thought about housing their people who've lost their homes? So here Torah says, if they're not going to make peace with you, they're going to keep shooting their rockets at you. Hem them in, constrict them, confine them, and that's the first stage of battle. Cut off all their supplies. Period. Done. That's what Torah says. That's how you go to war. It doesn't say the first thing you do is start launching rocks against their walls. It doesn't say the first thing you do is find access to the city and do the Trojan horse thing. None of that. It says just lay siege to the city, and they'll get an idea of what it means to not have access to outside food or animals or what have you. Maybe even won't have access to water. Maybe their water supply is outside the city in wells that are right outside the city gates. Well, they won't have access to that anymore. Normally, you wouldn't build a city without access to water, but some biblical places, that was exactly what they had to do. So lay siege. That should give the people inside the city a chance to feel what it's like not to be free to have access to what they used to have access to. And after a couple of days of laying siege to a city, they start to have shortages of toilet paper. You start to have shortages of vegetables and fruits. And then they start to have shortages of raw materials and shortages of this, that, and the other thing. Before you know, they're living on subsistence of some sort. Now, did Israel do that to Gaza? No. While Israel is fighting a battle against its enemy, launching 4,300 rockets in an 11-day attack, and Israel is shooting down about 90% of them with the Iron Dome and taking a couple of direct hits in Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Dimona, and the suburbs of Tel Aviv. Every day, Israel is sending semi-trucks filled with food and filled with whatever they send to Gaza every day anyway, to the Gaza border. And what was Hamas doing? They were blowing up the trucks. Don't get any dumber than that, but hey, listen, Hamas doesn't rule because it's brilliant. It rules because it's brutal. So therefore, they were blowing up trucks full of goods for the people so that they would have medicine and food and all the rest of the stuff that Israel ships in daily to Hamas. I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that talked about very much on CNN or MSNBC, by the way. But I didn't hear that written about in the New York Times either, which is really interesting to know. All the news that's fit to give you fits. So lay siege to it. After the siege comes the biblical way of handling warfare. Not pretty, but it was the biblical way of handling warfare. When you win a battle against another people, the best way to determine that you will not have to face that people in a battle again next time is to wipe them out. Period. End of report. You just kill the whole group. That's it. Done. Finished. Especially if you're not an empire. You know, if you're the Assyrians and you control massive groups of people and massive groups of massive amounts of land, that's one thing. If you're the Babylonian Empire and you have the largest army in the Middle East at the time, and you know you have tens of thousands of men under in uniform and marching with horses and on, then you can do whatever you want with the people. You can have exiles, and you can bring people into your land, and you can incorporate them and all that. But if you're a small people and you're going up against another small people, and you don't want to have to keep going up against that small people again and again and again and again, you wipe them out. That's it. Period. End of report. So here's what happens. You've laid siege to the city. They've refused to have peace with you. V'natana Adonai Elohecha biyadcha, and the Lord your God has put them in your hands. That is, you've won the battle. V'ikita et kol zechora lefi harev, and you finally enter the city after this time of siege or whatever kind of warfare took place, and you shall put all the men to the sword. Kill them all. That's biblical warfare. That's what the Assyrians did every time they won a battle. I couldn't find out whether the Hittites did that, but I'm pretty sure the Hittites were pretty ruthless in their victories, because they were the strongest dudes in the territory in the 10th and the 10th and 11th centuries BCE. And then the Assyrians sort of defeated the Hittites, didn't really destroy them completely, but did great damage to the Hittites and took over much of their territory. The Hittites lived in Anatolia, in what is today Eastern Turkey. And the Assyrians took over much of Eastern Turkey and took over all of what is today Syria, all of what is today Lebanon, all of what is today Iraq, most of what is today Uzbekistan and Ukraine. The Assyrians had an enormous empire. And when they defeated a people, their rulers, they had four major kings, and their kings had terrifying names. I mean, the names themselves were enough to cause shivers to the people around them. Shalmaneser, sounds like a perfume. Tiglath-Pileser III. I don't know anything about the first or second, and there was no fourth, but Tiggy was a fearsome warrior. He left no one alive. Sargon II was the king who ultimately was one of the two main kings that defeated the northern kingdom of Israel. And the one who ultimately defeated the northern kingdom was Sennacherib. Sennacherib sounds like a fast food chain.
I have a comment.
Pardon?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
The word Zechua they translate it here as male.
Uh-huh.
But it could be another translation from the word Zahar.
Yeah.
You remember?
Yeah.
You wipe out their memory from the face of the earth.
But it says Lefi Harav.
The ficher, yeah, with the sword. You wipe out their memory.
Well, I'm not sure you wipe out a memory with a sword. Maybe a Jewish space laser. But I don't think we could do it with I don't think you'd wipe out a memory with a sword. So therefore, I think you'd have to translate Zahura as male. But you're right. It could be Zahor. I mean, it could be memory. But Zahura, and it's kind of strange, isn't it, that the word Zahura is feminine to mean male.
Right.
Yeah. Talk about irony. But that's true. And it also says hikita, which means to strike or to hit. So v'hikita et kol zuchora lefi cherev, and you shall smite or smote or hit or strike every zuchora, every male, according to lefi, by the mouth of the cherev, of the sword.
Okay.
So yeah, I think I think you have to translate it as men and not memory. But you're right, David. It could be either way.
So what are the consequences of that? If there aren't any males left from their enemy, just women, do they take over the women and take care of them?
Well, now take a look at the next verse.
Oh, well, I can't see it yet.
I know. Oh, you can't? Okay. Now can you see it? 14?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can see 14. Oh, enjoy the use of the spoil of your enemy.
Right.
Okay.
Rak hanashim v'hataf, but the women and the children, it's really kind of interesting. Women is plural. It doesn't say isha, it says nashim, plural. But then it says taf, which is singular. But the women and the child, kind of strange. I'd sort of like to take David one day. We'll go through the entire Torah and redo it so that everything, so that all the words kind of fit the way they're supposed to fit. It should be tapim, kol hanashim v'tapim. It should be plural, but it's singular.
It's plural. It's not singular.
What, taf is plural?
Taf is children.
Really?
Yeah.
And you wouldn't say tapim?
No.
Ever?
Ever.
So taf is like sheep?
Taf is plural for children.
I'll be darned. Well, that's new for me.
Yeah.
Huh.
Rabbi?
Yeah. Oh, it does say children, little ones. But it's that's pretty interesting. It also says, yeah, okay. And thank you for that. I did not know that.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Mel here. First, let me say that we had no sound on the computer until about 10 minutes ago. So much of what I have to say has probably already been repeated. But to me, the words that were read on this screen, together with what I heard, caused me to know that there are at least 4 basic principles of life that are brought forth by these words. The first when they were saying that the priest will lead you and know that God's with you and the rest of it. The first thing that I get out of it for my life is that God is with me. God, but I have to take the bit in my teeth, and I have to do things. It goes to what Elie Wiesel said when they asked where was God in the concentration camps, if God was all powerful and all knowing, and Elie Wiesel said God is here, and God is with us, but we have to do our part. We have the things to do. Secondly, the portion of what the leaders were talking about, that if any of among you have not planted you planted the vineyard, but you haven't taken care of it, get out of here and go take care of it, or go ahead and consummate the marriage, unless someone else would do it. That's my lesson of life, that life is short, that I have no security blanket, that I have time to do what I think should be done. If there's something that I believe is right and good, you don't hesitate. You do it, because there may be no tomorrow. The third lesson from the words here, and it was at this time that the sound came on, and we were talking about the sieging of the city and the various steps of the city, and to me, I have to do battle with many different things during my life, and when it is here, it may be that I fail for something, or the opponent says something, and I cannot go forward. So what do I do? And the lesson that I get from this Sedra here is that there are other ways to get to the problem. Just because you fail one way, it doesn't mean that that's the end of it. And to me, if I may, the recent development in Washington, where the nonpartisan commission on the January 6th problem in Washington was blocked. That to me, that doesn't mean that that's the end of it. There are ways of going to it. Even if a committee, a Democratic committee, goes ahead they can establish rules where they can name the Democrats can name a Republican vice chairman temporarily, and the Democrats can name Republican staffers to do it. And they can conduct the seemingly partisan committee as an independent committee just by their activities. And again, when you lay siege to something and you are prevented from going forward, that's not the end of it. That's not the end of it. It's incumbent to find a way to do what you think has to be done. And that was a lesson of the Sedra. The fourth area that impressed me so was the thing that the process that when you go to offer peace, and if the peace is rejected, you go ahead and you smite everyone. And that may be the biblical way of doing it, but that's not my way of doing it. My way is that I have to live with these opponents. I have to live where people don't agree with me, and I don't know what the next time will be that
She'll go to battle.
To go forward. So the end result there again is going back to finding a way to get from point A to point B, and that's the human way, that's the human spirit. And this Sedra had so many lessons of life and what life is all about, and the relationship between religion and life, and what place religion has in my life. It was very, very illuminating, even though I missed the sound at the beginning. But it is good to participate with you now.
Thanks.
And I will not say anything more.
Thank you, Mel. That was very insightful and appreciated. See, the problem with reading Torah is that we tend to read it with 21st century minds when it was written with 10th century before the Common Era insights and thoughts and realities. So it's so that when we read it, we need to read it as non-judgmentally as we can, by trying to put ourselves back in the time of the people when it applied. It's not that some of these rules apply to today, but it is that some of these rules would put an end to some of the mishigas that we've put up with over the past 73 years in Israel. For instance, what would have happened if a total victory came about and it was in Israel's power to wipe out all the males? Would we do that? No, because we live in the 21st century. We wouldn't do it. Would we do it in the 10th century before the Common Era? I tend to think we would, because that was the only way to stop the warfare. And warfare destroyed so many families at a time when there weren't that many families. I mean, you're talking about a country that had, maybe 100, 200,000 people. I don't know how many people lived in Israel in the 9th century or 8th century or 10th century before the Common Era. A couple of 100,000 maybe, tops. I can't imagine there were more than that. And so if you have to go to war, only about 40% of those would have been fit for battle. If you've got to go to war every year, every 2 years against the same people, I would say that their solution would have been, next time you win this battle, just win it once and for all and be done with it. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Let's get rid of the enemy once and for all and be done with them. That would terminate the angst that we feel. So, just let me pause for a moment. Alvin, it's good to see you. One of my old high school buddies. It would be better to see you than to see your name, but it's good to see your name. Maybe click in for a second. I'll just wave at you. How'd you get so old, man?
How you doing?
I'm
great to see you, Ray.
It's good to see you. Al and Les and I were high school buddies at Culver City Junior High and Culver City High School.
That's correct.
It's just the three Jewish guys here. Although
Rabbi, please don't forget La Bayona Grammar School.
Oh, and La Bayona Grammar School. Yeah, for sure. Did you go to La Bayona, Al?
I did not.
I
came from Cleveland, and I went to Short Avenue, which was on the far west side of Culver City.
Ah, okay. Wow. I didn't even know there was one. La Bayona, when we first moved to Culver City from Cincinnati, the first words that we heard were La Bayona. And I thought, lot of baloney? What is this all about? And it turned out to be the name of a major creek that ran through Culver City, and they named the elementary school after the creek. So we were up a creek for a couple of years there.
Because a whale swam up the creek and died. Yeah. And in Spanish, a whale is La Bayona.
Yeah. Anyway, it's really it's just a lot of fun to see you. It's good to see you.
I really enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
A pleasure. Let's see, we got about 10 minutes, and let's see if I can't get through this verse 14. So it says, Raka Nashim V'Hataf. New learning for me here. Only the women and the children, V'Habahema. There's another singular that's a plural, and the cattle, V'Kol Asher Yiyeh Ba'ir, and everything else that's in the city that you have defeated, Kol Shlala, all of its spoils. Shlal is spoils. It's a great word, shlal. Tavoz lacha. You shall. Tavoz means really to despoil. But in this context, it really is tavoz lacha, which really means just kind of take it to yourself, devalue it for other people's, and take it for yourself. Just this last week, I learned that there's a difference between flotsam and jetsam. I thought flotsam and jetsam was like the expression for things that went overboard, right? Things that came off of a ship and went into the ocean. But that's not, I mean, it's true that that's what it is, but there's a difference between flotsam and jetsam. Does anybody know what the difference is? See, I didn't think so because I didn't know.
I think that flotsam means it floats and jetsam it sinks, or I don't remember, but that's what I think it is.
Flotsam means it floats and jetsam means it sinks. Is that what you said? Well, a lot of people thought that, but it doesn't actually mean that. Flotsam is that which falls off of a ship of its own accord. It accidentally fell off a ship. You know, a rudder falls off. Whatever falls off a ship is flotsam. But that which is thrown off a ship is jetsam. So if it falls off by itself, it's flotsam. And if you throw it off, cigarette butt, jetsam. So that was the difference. So here in this particular verse, kol shlala tavoz lecha, anything that looks like flotsam or jetsam is yours. Anything that comes by accident into your hand or anything that you happen to pick up that you like, it's all yours. V'achalta et shlal, and you can eat that which is food as spoil, not as spoilage, as spoils, as shlal oivecha, as the spoils of your enemy, asher natan Adonai Elohecha lach, which God, the Lord your God, gave you. In other words, the whole city, everything in it is yours. There's nothing that you can't have. Obviously, the following rules are going to be very interesting. So, you know, next fall when we start again, the whole concept of what you can do with the shlal, what you can do with the women and children, are the first evidence of truly humane behavior in warfare that the ancient Near East ever sees. Because one of the things that we know from the Assyrian experience, especially under Ashurbanipal and Shalmaneser, that after a city was conquered and the Assyrians just ran roughshod over all cities in the ancient Near East, they would, whether the city gave up or whether the city tried to fight against the Assyrians, they would move into the city. They would take all of the men in the city and they would cut off their heads and form an enormous pyramid of their heads that they placed before the king sitting upon a royal throne. And when he approved this pyramid of skulls, then they were able to go and take the women and take the children, do whatever they wanted, and of course, all the spoils. And the only way in which the army got paid was by giving freedom to them to take all the spoils. That was their pay. They were a professional army that didn't get a single penny from anybody, but they got all the spoils they could capture. And that was their pay. And so therefore, the Assyrians had to keep going to war to keep their army intact and to feed the narcissism of the king. So, you know, that was the rules of engagement for the Assyrians 9 centuries before the Common Era. And it was not the same for the Babylonians because Nebuchadnezzar was a different kind of king. Nebuchadnezzar was not the narcissist that Shalmaneser and Tiglath-Pileser and Sanherib were so, and Babylonia wasn't looking for war. It was looking for money. And unfortunately, when Babylonian representatives came to visit Jerusalem as a political mission from Babylon, the person who welcomed them into the city was stupid enough to take them into the temple and show these Babylonians the great treasures that were in the temple. And that, of course, whetted the appetite of Nebuchadnezzar, who then came to Jerusalem for the treasure, not for the people, which is why he clearly was able to take the people back who wanted to go with him in captivity, as opposed to slaughtering them as the Assyrians might have done. Why the Assyrians didn't slaughter the northern kingdom is a question for historians to answer, because I can't say. It might have been the only people they never destroyed. And it might have had something to do with the fact that the Assyrians were truly afraid of the power of the God of Israel. And, we laugh, but it's not really funny that they were very concerned that the God of Israel might wreak havoc on the Assyrians if they treated the people poorly. I have a friend who keeps telling me that in ancient times, when you captured a city, you captured its God. You didn't just destroy the city, you destroyed its deity. And therefore, the deity of the capturing people became the deity of the people who were left behind in the city. But in the case of the Assyrians and the Jews, Sanherib did not destroy the people. He actually took the people into captivity and then dispersed them, and they became the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Anyway, we have reached the end of another season. What was this, number 35? Number 36? I can't keep track. But in any event, if it was the end of number 35, then we have double Chai to look forward to next year. And if it was the end of 36, we made it through a pandemic, thanks to having a double life. We're going to start again symbolically on 9/11. It should be hopefully a non-explosive beginning, but it should be fun because hopefully we'll be able to get another few chapters done next year. And being on chapter 20, there are only 34 chapters in Deuteronomy, so we only have about 13 and a half to go. Maybe, in fact, we finish the Torah in 40 years. Would that not be symbolic to have read through the entire Torah verse at a time in 40 years? I just think that would be very symbolic. So we'll see what happens.
Are we going to continue on Zoom?
Yes. Even if we do have some in-person stuff, I would also like to do Zoom as well. So right now I'm just planning on continuing on Zoom, but we might do both. We might have Zoom and in person for them that wants to gather. Might be a little tough to come here from Florida, from California, or from Germany, or from Scotland, or from all over the world. But hey, you never know.
You never know.
You never know. So we'll see what.
We really appreciate what you do.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you. Thank you.
This has been marvelous. I've just really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's good to see you all. You're all
Hey, thank you, Rabbi.
a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure and a half, you guys. Be well, stay safe, and come back healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Sei gesund.
Thank you.